Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today we're going to talk about SMC. So SMC is one of the early import companies to import ceiling fans anywhere in the... Okay, let's start over. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today we're going to talk about SMC. I think everybody who deals with ceiling fans is familiar with SMC. They're a huge manufacturer. They're one of the earliest manufacturers to import ceiling fans into the U.S. We'll cover that in a little bit. They're one of the first, I think they're the very first manufacturer to export ceiling fans out of Hong Kong. There are a lot of firsts. They're, a very popular company for ceiling fan manufacturing. So let's get into it. So in 1952, they started manufacturing ceiling fans and other electrical appliances in Hong Kong. The founder's name was Young Yao. In 1955, they became the first exporter of ceiling fans from Hong Kong. In 1962, they filed their first patents for ceiling fans. SMC has tons of ceiling fan patents over the years. I'm not going to cover all of them. If you want, you can go on Google Patents and look for them yourselves. I'm just going to cover a few important ones. In 1966, they were able to build their SMC headquarters labeled the Shell Industrial Building. So they were big enough by 66, less than 20 years after they were founded, to have their own industrial complex. In 1970, they incorporated as the Shell Electric Manufacturing Company Limited. In 1973 is when they first are advertised in the U.S. Now, they were imported before that in small quantities, but you first see them advertised in the U.S. in 73. In 78, they established the first overseas marketing office. So we've talked in some of the other videos, you can't just sell back and forth to the U.S. If you're going to sell here, you have to have a presence here, which is why Moss would import and then they would be the presence and so on. But SMC was the first company to establish their own presence in the U.S. so they could sell directly to Kmart and other department stores, other resellers, bypassing anybody else. They didn't need to be a middleman. They could sell directly to the retailer, and they opened SMC Marketing Corporation in Los Angeles in 78. Also in 78, they patented having the capacitor in the upper canopy, which is interesting because you don't see that in SMCs very often, but they actually hold the patent for that. In 1979 is when you first see them advertised as FANCO, which I originally thought was a Kmart relabel, but it shows up at other retailers, so it's clearly something that SMC Marketing Corporation was doing. They show up as FANCO in 79. In 1980, they patent a bottom mount spinner that looks like a Laguna with blades mounted to the bottom. I've never actually seen one of these in the wild, but the patent exists for one, and they may have been sold. That was 1980. The blades mounted directly to the bottom. There were no blade brackets, like literally the blades screwed to the motor the way an industrial would. Okay, in 1981, they patented the ornate A52. They patented their 3-speed motor windings, which we've talked in SMC test videos are very unusual because I think low draws more current than medium, something like that. They have their own very specific way of deriving 3 speeds, and they patented. So no one else can do it their way. That was patented in 81. They also patented their hugger mount bracket. If you've ever installed an SMC hugger, you know that their mounting for huggers is different than anybody else, and that's because they patented it. That was patented in 81. That's got to be one of the first huggers. I don't know when the Moss Highline showed up. That's got to be one of the first. I'm actually going to look that up real quick if you're okay. If I can't do this quickly, then we'll just skip it. See if I can find if there's information about the Moss Highline. Yeah, the Highline was 82. So unless, it's not confirmed, but I think, actually, let me try one other thing. And if this goes on too long, I will make this a new video because I don't like to go off script too often. But sometimes something comes to me while I am reading my notes. That can't be right. That's... Okay, so the first hugger ceiling fans were actually... That's a close mount in 19 80. Can we count a close mount, judges? And then by 82, we got here. So it depends if you want to call it a close. It's a draw because the big wide close mount canopies showed up, it looks like, in around 1980. But the first actual hugger that I can find would be, let's try one other thing. I think I am going to start this over. I think this is going to be an outtake because I've been doing, okay, so, yeah, this will be an outtake. Hold on, hang tight, we're going to start over. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. So today we're going to talk about SMC. I think everybody here knows SMC. They're a huge manufacturing presence and have been for over 50 years. They have made really cheap fans. They've made really quality fans. They have supplied big retailers. I think almost everybody's used them as a house brand at some point. So you probably know SMC. So let's talk about them. They were founded in 1952 by Young Yao in Hong Kong, making ceiling fans and other electrical appliances. In 1955, they became the first exporter of ceiling fans from Hong Kong. They were actually, I believe, the first company to import ceiling fans into the U.S. around about this time, but they only did very small quantities, and you can't really find any evidence of that. It's just, you know, anecdotal information. In 1962, they filed their first patents for ceiling fans. SMC holds a lot of patents for ceiling fans. We're going to talk about some of them. We're not going to be able to go over all of them because there's just too many. In 1966, they complete their SMC headquarters as the Shell Industrial Building. So in their first 20 years of operation, they became a big enough company to have their own industrial complex. In 1970, they incorporate as the Shell Electric Manufacturing Company. In 73 is when you first see them advertised in the U.S. Again, I've heard of them being brought into the U.S. as early as the 50s, but the earliest concrete evidence we have of them showing up here is 73. In 1978, they are the first company to establish an overseas marketing office. So if you think about what we've talked about in past videos, how you can't just sell from overseas to here, you need an importer and there's customs and all of that. You need a presence here, which is how, you know, David Moss would then sell to the lumber yards and stuff. He would import the fans, and he had DMZ Overseas Trading. King of Fans was set up to bypass him, but you still need a presence here. And so SMC was the first company to be an overseas company that set up a separate company here so they could sell fans directly to Kmart and whoever else they sold to without needing a third party. And that company was called SMC Marketing Corporation, and it was opened in Los Angeles, California in 1978. Again, it was to bypass the trading companies. Also in 1978, they patented having the capacitor in the upper canopy, which is interesting because you don't see too many SMC ceiling fans with that. In 1979, they first show up as FANCO, which I believe was something that the SMC Marketing Corporation set up, because that was essentially the house brand name when a retailer didn't put their own house brand name on it. 1980, they patented a bottom mount spinner that I've never seen. It looks like a Laguna with blades bolted straight to the bottom and no blade brackets. I've never seen it. It'd be cool to find one. In 1981, it's a big year, they patented the Ornate A52. They patented the 3-speed motor, and you guys know that SMC's 3-speed motor is different than everybody else's. They've got that weird thing where low speed actually draws more current than medium, and it works really weird on a variable speed control. That was a patented SMC motor design. They patented their way of getting speeds in 81. That's why nobody else does it that way. And on the one hand, the more current draw isn't great, and the fact that it doesn't play well with solid state isn't great. On the other hand, they give a really great range of speeds without capacitors. So clearly they were onto something, and they used that for several years. Also interesting, in 1981, they patent their hugger mounting bracket. Now, if you've ever installed an SMC hugger, especially an earlier one, their mounting bracket designs are different than everybody else. I also have my suspicion they might have been the first ceiling hugger fan, because the Moss Highline doesn't show up until 1982. And to be honest, I can't think of what other ceiling huggers show up. I think Union had one. I don't know when that showed up. So they might have been the first to import a ceiling hugger, but that's not confirmed. So in 1985, they actually patented the detachable switch housing. I think I maybe even said in the past that it was Halsey because that's what someone told me. It's actually SMC was the first to do it, and they patented it. In 1993, no, excuse me, I skipped. In 1990 is the last use of the FANCO name in advertising. So no more FANCO after 1990. And in 1993 is the last use of the SMC name in advertising. So everything sold as SMC after 1993 was just sold as a house brand. It was not sold as SMC or FANCO. Oh, my notes are out of order. So we're going to start this again. This will be another outtake. Sorry, guys. Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today we're going to talk about SMC. So I think most fan collectors and people involved in the ceiling fan business know SMC. They've been a huge manufacturer of ceiling fans since the 1950s. They've supplied most of the major retailers. They've been the manufacturer for a lot of house brands. They made a lot of fans that collectors like. I think everybody pretty much knows SMC. We know them as the first company to import ceiling fans into the U.S. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's get into the timeline. In 1952, SMC started manufacturing and trading electrical appliances, including ceiling fans, in Hong Kong. The founder's name was Young Yao. In 1955, they became the first exporter of ceiling fans to Hong Kong, we believe, into the U.S. and other companies. Okay, one more time. Welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, technical information. Welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today we're going to talk about SMC. I think most people involved with ceiling fans know SMC. They've been a huge manufacturer of ceiling fans since the 1950s. One of the major importers, one of the major suppliers for house brands, and a lot of collectors like their products. So let's get into it. In 1952, they were founded by Young Yao, is a manufacturer of small appliances and ceiling fans in Hong Kong. In 1955, they became the first exporter of ceiling fans from Hong Kong, we believe, into the U.S. and other countries because we've heard of them being brought here that early. In 1962, they filed their first ceiling fan patents, and SMC holds a lot of ceiling fan patents. We're going to talk about some of them. We're not going to talk about all of them. In 1966, they complete the SMC headquarters in the Hong Kong Shell Industrial Building. So less than 20 years after they were founded, they were a big enough company to have their own industrial complex with their name on it. In 1970, they incorporate as Shell Electric Manufacturing Company. In 1973, they first advertised in the U.S., so even though they've been importing? God, one more try. Welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we talk about ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today we're going to talk about SMC. So if you deal in ceiling fans, I'm sure you know SMC. They've been a huge manufacturer and importer of ceiling fans since the 50s. They've supplied most of the major retailers in the U.S. and other countries. A lot of collectors like their products. They're just a huge presence. So let's talk about them. They were founded in 1952 in Hong Kong by Young Yao as a manufacturer of electrical appliances, including ceiling fans. In 1955, they became the first exporter of ceiling fans from Hong Kong into the U.S. and other countries. In 1966, they filed their first ceiling fan patent. And they have a lot of ceiling fan patents, SMC does. We're going to talk about some of them. We're not going to talk about all of them. In 1970, they incorporate as Shell Electric Manufacturing Company Limited. In 1970, I skipped a note. This is the last time, and then we're going to try another day.